Okay, now that we've got our Goomba set up, we're ready for the player. If you already have the collision box body selected, if you don't, we just go to player and select it from there. This one we want to just add from our scripts folder from the projects. We want to go down to the, let's see where it's at. Should be Collider Attack Box. I just want to take this one and either add it to it within the hierarchy or just drag it over to the inspector, either one. We're going to lose our prefab, that's fine. Let's go ahead and click on Continue. And once it's added to the collision box body, let's go ahead and either double click on it if you don't have it open, or you can go to the scripts option here and just double click on it from here. Once it opens up, again this should just be an empty folder, empty file. We're going to work over all the code inside of it, set up the variables first, set up just the basic functions, and then we'll start filling everything out. So if we go back to our document on this one for the variables and the functions, let's go ahead and just copy over the variables. We'll assume that these are going to be the names that we use for it. And inside of here, let's go ahead and just delete all of this. We'll start fresh. Alright. So for these, we just want to go ahead and define them as variable type. So I'm just going to define each of these as a variable type. Some of these, though, let's go ahead and, for instance, on our options for inside of here, the only ones that we actually need inside the inspector are going to be the sound files and then the time to be able to adjust the time. The rest of them are all going to be private variables. There's no reason to actually have these as part of the inspector. So we'll just copy these and paste it in here. Part of the fun side is that if you actually, inside of any kind of document that you're making, if you define it well enough, you should just be able to copy what you actually have for your definitions for variables and functions, and actually just make those. It can actually, in one side, it could speed things up for you, or at least reduce the amount of thinking that you actually have to do along the way. Along with that, we'll go ahead and take our description and our instructions as well, and we'll use those for the header part of it. Let's go ahead and start off, though, by giving it the name. So this is going to be the player collider. We'll say attack properties, or we can just say attack component. Alright, and let's place in a couple of extra parts of the information. And there we go. Okay, so we have those set up. Let's go ahead and do our type for each one of these. And again, this being, for instance, on the hit distance, this is going to be basically taking the distance where how far the player is going to be hit. We've already kind of defined a number for it, which we'll use as 3. If we need to adjust it later, we can adjust it in the inspector. This one starting off will be about a 0.2. That's going to be how long the hit takes to actually go across. What we're going to do initially, once we set in the hit time, is that we're going to want to try and make it so that the player, when he's hit, moves about 1 box over. So every time he's hit, he kind of jumps back a whole box. Alright, for each of these, we just want an audio clip. And we're just going to be loading up a file inside through the inspector. Oops. Okay, and then inside of our the private variables, this first one is just the game object of the player object. It's just going to hold the player object for us. And then the hitting left and hitting right are just going to be bool statements. And each one of these, let's go ahead and set them off as default. We'll just set everything to false on those. And one of the reasons we're doing this, once we get into it, you'll kind of notice it's similar to the HUD that we did before, is that when you got an extra life, we actually had to turn on and off the options for it. That way we didn't actually give him any more lives than he should during the trigger event. And we're just going to be doing the same thing for taking a life away, so that every time he's hit, it's either the state that's changing only once, or or the life being taken away. The sound rate, sound delay, these are ones we've already done before from our other function, and we'll just go ahead and set these as floats and set them to 0. And we'll just leave this one as undefined on this type. Alright. So this gives our start for the variables. We'll fill in the comments here in a second. The functions that we're going to be using is going to be the start function. We're going to need a function for updating. Alright. And the other function that we'll need, let's just copy this part since we're going to have a lot. Alright. We're going to want a function for a trigger event. So we'll say on trigger enter. We'll go ahead and set in the parameters on this one. We'll go ahead and call it just a standard other collider. And then we also need a trigger event for exit. And what we want to do for this, the idea behind doing both of these is that when the player enters, meaning the player gets over here and this box enters this box, what's going to happen is it's going to call up an event to actually occur, but the moment this guy flies out, so when we push him back out, we also want to turn off the event immediately. So we're going to be checking for the enter and exit on the collision types. Alright, so we're setting in a trigger enter, trigger exit, and then we've also got, if you remember, we're having the hit left, hit right, and the hit dead, and then the change player and sound. So let's go ahead and place those in here. For this one, the hit left, and these, we don't need anything inside. We're just running just the function on it. So let's say, oops, hit right. And we have one for hit dead. Notice we're already getting quite a lot of functions, but we're trying to separate our code out a little bit more intelligent like we've been doing before. We're trying to set it up into small little sections here that we can actually reuse if we need to as well. The function for this one, we're going to make one that's called that change player state. So that's going to be where we change the player from like a Fireball Mario to a large to a small. We can change them back and forth. And then we have the already defined function that we're going to be calling and using up again. Is going to be the play sound, which will need our sound name and our sound delay. Alright. So we have our variables set up. We've got our function set up. The next step that we're going to do is set in all the code for each one of these. We'll just start going through the ones, just kind of grow the code up so that way you can see how it works on the small side, and then as it starts to get larger you can see how it's going to work as more of the complete set.